Welcome to Quantum RX, the podcast that teaches you how to move beyond stuck emotions and trauma for mind, body, and spirit healing. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I struggled with it myself over time. I have to say it showed up in many different iterations over time, just giving me the opportunity to reflect and see where I needed to address things internally. And this topic is scarcity. And I'm going to be talking about how I helped a client of mine turn scarcity into opportunity because so often it really is a gift. And it's interesting because as I reflect back on my own journey, I can see so many times over the years where, that yearning to bring in either the perfect client, the perfect patients, the perfect opportunities and conditions so that your life is what you want it to be. How felt like I was always like either undershooting or overshooting that. I could never land right on the target that I wanted. And it was time and time again because of either limiting beliefs, the way that I was showing up in my mindset on a daily basis, or even some of the traumas that I had. And we'll dive into that more today as we go through this. But yes, let's get into what the main topics are for today and how we can shift this for you. We're going to be talking about how your energy is calling in misaligned clients or situations in your life that show up as challenges or speed bumps. We're going to discuss common limiting beliefs that show up as scarcity. Things such as, I charge too much, or I seem too salesy, or I don't want to come across as pushy. We're going to dive into those and what they really represent. And lastly, we're going to talk about some shifts that you can make to change your energy from that scarcity to gratitude, service, and abundance. If you're curious as to if you have any stored emotions or trauma that might be causing illness, preventing you from achieving your goals, or even just showing up as that best, most authentic version of yourself, I invite you to take my free stored emotions and trauma quiz, and you will find that link in the show notes. All right, so let's get to it. So it's interesting. I'm going to read to you guys today what I actually wrote to this person that I'm working with. I don't know. I think many of you who've listened to me before know that I work with a wide variety of people on many different things, but a major subset of people that I work with are entrepreneurs, business owners, and very similar, like just similar high achieving people that want to get to, the next level in business or life, or they have a major goal. And so this one person that I'm working with, she reached out and she had landed what she thought was a perfectly aligned client for her program. She's a coach. And we were all in celebration mode. And then the next day, the person backed out. And she was very upset about this. And she's like, how do I prevent this from happening? And I said to her, I'm going to read this to you right now. I said, this is such an opportunity. I gently invite you to consider why this feels, pushy or salesy. Remember that life presents us with mirrors all of the time, and something deep inside you holds the why. This provides an opportunity to evaluate your own boundaries and beliefs. It may take some time to unpack this, but it really is a gift in that the more you release the limitations and baggage, reframe the stories, and have laser focused clarity, the more you'll draw in your ideal clients. And then I just went on to tell her, I know this because I battled this for years in my practice and my business. I really had to let go of so many beliefs and patterns that weren't serving me. And the stories about money were huge and honestly, some of the hardest to change. But once I did, I started calling in extremely aligned patients and clients. The last thing I left her with was money is often masking a deeper fear. It feels more comfortable to reach out to people from a place of gratitude, love, and service. It does not feel icky or pushy, because you are coming at it from that angle. So that's what I replied back to her. And that's what she and I will be diving into and working on. So I wanted you guys to see kind of the thought process behind what I said and what we're going to talk about today. But also, this has been coming up quite a bit for many people that I work with in different capacities. I've had this conversation quite a bit, especially in the last week or two, but in the last, I'd say month, maybe couple of months, it's showing up for a lot of my business owners and entrepreneurs in many different ways. It's also showing up in people's lives in general. And I don't think it's a surprise at all, given the state of what's going on in the world. And we honestly are in a massive time of shift and change. And it's happening on a global scale. And there's a lot of energy in the discontent of the world, right? From the political aspect affecting, financial markets. But truly, we don't have to buy into that, because I'm sure many of you have seen online all of the kind of posts and memes and just different things about all of the businesses and all of the prosperity that can happen during times of great pressure and great change. There are lots of businesses that have been founded during times of challenge, kind of similar to what we're in right now. I know people often cite, Bill Gates with Microsoft and Steve Jobs with Apple, and then, a lot of businesses that were established during the Great Depression. And if you continue to dig into this, there are many big businesses and big things that have happened during times of challenge. And I don't think that's a surprise, because it forces us to do one of two things. You really can buy into the narratives and the stories that are happening and be like, oh, everyone thinks money's tight, so I have to think money's tight too. Or you could see it as, there's changes and shifting going on right now. It causes you to maybe think of things in a different way. And you might have the opportunity to bring something to the world that is of value, right? And I think we all have that capacity and capability of bringing things to the world that are of value, not just monetarily, but also from a social aspect and a service aspect, and, just bringing goodness to the world. And you can choose to live in that space. And that's what I would invite all of you to do, is to get off social media in the aspect. I think it can be helpful, but it can also be very harmful. So in my personal newsfeed, I have it tailored such that I avoid the negativity. When I get people that are negative in my newsfeed and buying into all this stuff, I either snooze them for 30 days. I stop following people. There's a lot of things that I do to try to make sure that I'm not getting that. I noticed recently that Facebook particularly, and Google, no surprise, they're both massive entities, are trying to send me all of this regular news, like Fox, ABC, MSNBC, all this stuff. I do not pay attention to that, and I haven't for over 20 years. Most of that type of news that I hear is either from people or in my surroundings, occasionally people will bring it up. But I mean, even people I know, I'm like, you know what? If you're going to go down to negative town with the news, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to hear about it. I'm not going to buy into the kind of the narratives that they want us to believe in, the fear mongering. So that's something that I consciously choose to avoid. So there are ways you can do that, just not watching the news and avoiding those types of places. If you have found a source where you feel like you can get, I want to say, relatively unbiased media, that's great. I would love for you to share that in the comments, because I feel like so much of what the evolution of media has been getting us to buy into the fear and it's playing at our primal, literally our primal drives and our primal instincts. It's like feeding, like you can get sucked into that cycle of fear. So they're going after that and they know that they can because over time it has proven very effective from the very first newspapers and, periodicals that came out. So a couple hundred years ago, it has been a machine and it is a machine. So you can choose to avoid that. And that kind of leads us into, our first point here is how is your energy, like I said before, calling in misaligned clients and situations that show up in your life? Because if you're coming from a place of lack, if you're coming from a place of desperation and neediness, and I know because I have felt this, I know what that feeling feels like. It was like, that feeling I just want the perfect patients. I just want the perfect clients. Why am I getting everything under the sun when I'm just marketing for, GI or immune dysfunction? That happened to me for quite a bit, for a very long time in the beginning of my career, because I had just graduated from school and obviously had a significant amount of debt because going through any kind of professional doctoral program in the health arena is very expensive. And I was just like, I need to get people in the door and I need to see people. And I quickly realized, even though in my very young and naive brain, I wanted to see everyone under the sun and I wanted to help everyone and, yada, yada, yada. That was my story. And I quickly realized that when you're seeing complex cases, you can't do that. You have to have an area of specialization. And given the fact that I came from a microbiological and immunological background in my previous life, in my previous work, being a researcher, gut and immunity kind of were a natural wheelhouse for me. And I started focusing on that because really, when you focus on that, it still is a very wide open arena. And I was literally calling in everything under the sun. I would get people who had fatigue. I would get people who had like lupus and I had Lyme. I had so many things walking in the door. And I feel like this was, the universe, God, spirit source, whatever you want to call it, nudging me to say, hey, you need to like pick a lane and get a little bit more focused. But I didn't for a long time. I just floundered in that arena and it sucked because instead of like kind of honing my craft, I spent so much time researching things that I didn't really like. It's not that I didn't want to see them. It wasn't where the core of what I really wanted to see lie. And so I struggled with that for like 5 years. It was tough. And then I got a little more nuanced and I started going after autoimmune conditions. And that was great for a while because I was really focusing on gut focused, autoimmunity. And that was good. And then I realized that, well, I was good at that and I had expertise in it. That's not where my passions, really, really were. And so I really wanted to work with moms and kids. And when I got laser focused on that, I started calling those people in and it was amazing because I knew what it took internally to get those right people. But it was interesting because like that only showed up for a while. And I honestly feel like the universe presents us with opportunities. God presents us with opportunities, right? And so I ended up, I was really happy with that, but I knew I wanted more. And I knew I had to address some issues that I had. So this is, a perfect segue into the next point of, what are those common limiting beliefs that show up as scarcity? For me, one that was prominent for a long time was charging too much to be of service. But at the same time, I was like, I was charging a certain amount and I was doing so much work on the back end with research into conditions and just research into what this person, like labs does this person need? What are, all of the different things that we needed. And my husband kiddingly said to me one day, he's like, yeah, he's like, with all the research you do, you probably only make like 5 cents an hour. And that hit hard because it was true. I was spending so much time and not actually getting compensated for that. And so that was one of my first opportunities to, kind of change a limiting belief. Also, Another big one that comes up for people is not wanting to be salesy or pushy. And again, these are all ideas that stem from, kind of that scarcity and lack. And the interesting thing is that scarcity is more of a representation. It represents more of your core instincts and wiring that's designed to keep you safe and secure, which goes back to the subconscious mind. So it's a dual edged sword, right? It's positive, it's not all bad because at its heart, it is designed to keep you attuned to the availability of resources. And if you don't have a balanced kind of emotional foundation and self worth and kind of mindset and beliefs, it can take over and become negative. Where you might have, that laser focus and zero in on what you're lacking. And that's when it comes in to be an issue. And let me say this, it may not even be a conscious thought. Sometimes it is. If it's a conscious thought, that's pretty darn strong. But most of the time, it's subconscious and it's the things that were planted in us as kids. A lot of times we always talk about this subconscious, that identity really forms from birth and I would say even conception to the age of 5 or 6. And in that period of time, you're just absorbing so much information. So if you had absorbed from your parents, oh, we don't have enough money, always being super duper duper overly concerned. And I'm not saying it's not a good idea to be aware of cost of things, but if you're constantly hearing, oh, that's really expensive, or we can't afford that. Or we don't deserve that, or you don't deserve that. You're going to form this foundation of everything in the world is expensive in the back of your mind. You're going to view everything as super expensive and you don't have enough for it, or you're not good enough for it. That's another big piece. It's so often when I'm doing this work with people to uncover, the whys behind all this, because we all have so many different whys. They're unique to us and our own lived experience, but so much of it does come back down to self worth. Maybe you don't think you're good enough for that. Maybe you think you're like kind of an imposter. There's lots of ways that it'll present. I'm not good enough as the next person. There's a lot of comparison. And that was a hard one for me to identify in myself because I had never literally had the thought cross my mind of the I'm not good enough thing until I was at a retreat and I had kind of done a lot of digging and I came across the thought of I'm not good enough. And I was like shocked when it came out of my mouth. So I had to dig into that last year quite a bit. But the interesting thing was, even while I was holding that belief, I was still able to cultivate and call in the things that were helping me gain more in the space of abundance and gratitude and even service. I was gaining that momentum because I was aware. Awareness is a huge piece of it. And so that's what I want to talk about right now is what are the shifts you can make to change your energy from scarcity to gratitude, service, and abundance? And that was it. First step, awareness. Awareness is huge because it allows you to break those cycles of thinking. And so for me, again, it was like that for me, that the I'm not good enough was the last piece of the puzzle because I had done so much other kind of inner work and mindset shifting and belief shifting. And again, I always like to remind you guys that this doesn't happen overnight. This isn't like you have, this massive like aha breakthrough. You can, but I feel like it's more, you will have bigger breakthroughs at certain times, but it takes you time to kind of internally alchemize this and transform it right in your own being. And that shows up in lots of different ways in integration that's what the integration process is. It's kind of the alchemization of these changes and shifts and beliefs and all of these things. So awareness is first and it's huge. You've got to break that cycle of thinking. So, because again, so many things come down to basics in our brains. If you are thinking in those like scarcity mindsets and those types of beliefs, that all goes back to fear. So, like your brain and its major buckets, you've got the bucket of fear and you've got the bucket of safety. Which bucket are you pouring into? If you're in that constant, often subconscious feedback loop of kind of, I don't have enough, I'm not good enough, you're going to be pouring into the fear bucket. If you are in the space of awareness, then you can say, hey, that's not me. That's, it's just kind of what I tell people to do is like acknowledge it and be like, hey, that's just my brain. And it's my brain on its like autopilot feedback loop. It's like it literally has fear on speed dial. That is a huge thing that happens because your subconscious mind is always trying to keep you safe and alive. And sometimes it serves us and sometimes it doesn't. So that is a big thing. So if you catch yourself, you can be like, it's just my brain. I'm safe. I'm okay. I can do these things and I do deserve these things. You can start thinking in the opposite direction. And then that starts to pour into the safety bucket. And the more we do that, the more it allows our bodies to change and it allows our beliefs to change and it allows our energy to change, which is the biggest thing. We want to change our energy and vibrate at a higher frequency. And I know that's used a lot. And you hear people say, oh, I'm like high vibe and this and that and the other thing. I'm not talking about it in the fluffy aspect because I feel like there's a lot of that out there, especially in the world of social media now. But what I'm talking about is the literal, actual vibration of energy in your body. Because there are many, if you go out there and look for the resources, there are lots of charts where it shows the vibrational energy of different states of being and different emotions. And the higher you can get on that chart, usually on the bottom is things like, anger, frustration, guilt, sadness, jealousy, all of those things are lower. The more any kind of like discontent and the higher you can get into, kindness, appreciation, gratitude, love, joy, all of those things, abundance, authenticity, all of those things, all are much higher vibration. And you are going to call in what you are putting out. What you think about and what you are feeling is what you're calling into yourself. So we need to first break that cycle, like I just said. Second, most of us can't just be like, oh, flip the switch. I'm going to be thinking in abundance and gratitude and service and love and all of those things. You have to do work around it. And like I always say, I encourage you to do work that resonates with you, but you're going to have to do, like I do with the people I work with, uncover lots of different stones because most of the time, this is not a pretty little package where sometimes it is because, right, we are all different, but lots of times there's different ways this shows up. And I can just speak from my own experience and, some of the people that I've worked with as well. Um, It'll show up in different ways because what typically happens is like you identify something, you do the work, you change your beliefs, you change your mindset, you're vibrating at a higher frequency, and then things are going along really, really well. And then you get served by the universe, God, spirit, you get served another challenge. And that challenge is you can look at it as an opportunity. Yes, it might suck in the moment and not be like awesome and fun, but you can look at it as an opportunity for, growth and to internally reflect and be like, what is this telling me? Why does this keep showing up? Or why has this particular instance shown up in my life? That is literally how I view everything. I view everything this way. If I am in a situation and I keep on having like little pings or little feelings about it, I'm like, there's a reason this is happening. And it's because it's not serving me in some way, shape, or form, or it's a reason for me to reflect on something that I haven't addressed inside. And by and large, those happen less frequently now. But I actually had one happen last week. It was something it wasn't minor, but I think 2 years ago version of me or 3 years ago version of me probably would have lost her shit about it. But now I'm just like, you know what? It's a thing. I got to deal with it. And it was funny. I mean, to be completely transparent, it was like a tax bill that had been paid. And there was apparently confusion between the state and the federal government on this payment. And it was funny because I paid to the state and the federal government took it because I don't know. I've had lots of issues with the IRS in the past being like, you didn't pay your tax bill when I did. And I had, the in my bank account statement to show it. And I'm like, why is this going on? Why are you saying I didn't? It was because they were behind because they didn't have the staffing. And so essentially what happened was I had made a payment to the state and the federal government took that payment because they had said that I didn't pay my bill with them and I did. But it was because their wires were crossed because, as we know right now, there's a lot of people not working in the federal government. So it was just really, really interesting. And before I probably would have, like I said, lost my shit and been annoyed and been like, oh, this is just time that I have to take to deal with this and all the things. And yes, I know I'm like consciously aware that I am losing time. And to me, it was, an opportunity because I don't know if I've mentioned this, but when I went to the retreat that I was facilitating, the nervous system workshop at Rise Up last month, and it was interesting because I realized for me that one of my biggest illusions was time, telling myself about time. I never have time, but really when I carve out time and I'm very intentional and diligent about it, I have abundant time. But it's where I'm at in my mindset. I'm like, am I navigating and driving the ship of my life, or am I letting out external forces doing that? So to me, it was another nudge to be much more mindful and intentional with my time because I'll be completely transparent. I still sometimes struggle in that space. I will have many, many weeks where I'm great and I'm on the ball and I'm intentional and I'm diligent. And then life might happen and I might fall off, kind of fall off the wagon, so to speak. And then I kind of go back to like deeply entrained previous cycles. Admittedly, I can get back on the horse, so to speak, much quicker now. And I have that awareness. But sometimes I will say, I'll be completely honest, I'm human too. It just feels comfortable. It's like, oh, it feels comfortable to like lay here in bed and be in the comfort of my bed instead of getting up and doing the things that I know I need to do. Right. And so I keep on getting these little tiny breadcrumbs that are like, you need to be more diligent about certain aspects of how you use your time and the stories you're telling yourself about time. And so it's just really interesting. So that I was acutely aware of. So when that challenge presented itself last week, I was like, okay, I'll deal with it. I know it's going to suck up some of my productivity time dealing with both of these government entities who we all know are not efficient and often not helpful. Most of my interactions, with both of these entities have not been usually the most fruitful. It's interesting. Like any issues, I've had some like circular conversations with people, or also to be completely fair, I've had some great conversations with people who I thought were telling me to do the right thing and helping me in the past. And really what they were doing was just making the situation a little more difficult. But I don't believe that that was their intent. Like I spoke with some, in the past, some very nice people and they thought they were helping, but their advice was not the right advice. And that's okay. You know what? It's okay. I'm I don't hold it against them because they're working with the tools that they've been given by their job, by their managers, all of that type of stuff. So it's really interesting. So like I said, I'm like, do the emotional work surrounding everything and be aware of the situations and why they're presenting themselves. And one of the biggest things is, you know, making a concerted effort and putting yourself into this is the last piece, putting yourself into the space of discomfort when it comes to this. Because when you are actively changing anything, but especially this scarcity and abundance piece of the puzzle, it's hard. I find that a lot of the people that I work with, this is one of the most difficult things to come to terms with. It causes people a lot of anxiety. It causes people a lot of lost sleep. This is a very deeply seated belief, and it's a belief, it's mindset, it's emotions and trauma. That's a big thing to shift. There's a lot that's packaged in the term of what we call scarcity. And like I said, it represents your body trying to keep you attuned to the availability of resources, which is a positive, right? But if you don't have that good emotional foundation, it can take over and it spirals into something that you really don't want to be at the forefront of your mind or even in the back of your mind, so to speak. You need to give yourself grace when you're dealing with this. Realize that it probably won't shift overnight, but you also have to put yourself into that space of discomfort. And that discomfort is going to be addressing things. Like if you are sitting on a pile of bills that need to be paid, take that first step and call somebody and like look for ways to, to address that, to, say, hey, can I get on a payment plan or get that pile of bills, take the lowest one and say, I'm going to pay this one off first. Give yourself little steps. I mean, I can tell you, like, I had been in that place in the past too. I had been there, where you have to kind of come up with a plan, but making the plan to address it, and it's so uncomfortable, but it will prove dividends in the end because you are choosing yourself. You're choosing to move away from that place of scarcity. And the universe, God, source spirit recognizes that. So that's, putting yourself out there. Or if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur or a healthcare provider, like anything, a coach, you know, just when you're on calls, when you're trying to bring in patients and clients, you know, come from and embody that place of gratitude and service and abundance because it will be a lot easier to bring people in when you're coming from that rather than kind of reeking of desperation and like scarcity. Like nobody wants to work with that. And part of this is also getting clarity on who it is that you're serving, right? Who it is that you want to serve. Who do you want in your sphere? Who are you going to work best with? There's that piece of it too, but you're not going to be able to get that clarity until you're bringing people in, right? You'll know what you want to work with and what you don't want to work with by the people that you are currently working with. So you need to resolve some of those blocks to get to that place. And as you are in the space of doing this work and putting yourself in those uncomfortable places, it's going to pour more into that safety bucket and away from that fear bucket, like we talked about before. You really do want to be in that safety, mindset and that safety space because it will normalize to your nervous system. Your nervous system will be like, hey, it's not so scary to have these conversations with people about coming into either your practice or your business or coaching them or whatever your situation is. So that would be my invitation to you is to first break your cycle of thinking, identify places that you're aware of that you need to do work on. And then the last is stepping into that space of discomfort so that you can show your nervous system that it's okay and you can easily change these situations. And when I say easily, I'm saying it's not ever as hard as we think it's going to be. We tend to make things much worse in our minds than they are in reality. And if you've gone through any of these, like any similar situations where you have been aware of an issue internally surrounding scarcity, and you made some changes to resolve it, I would love to hear in the comments exactly what you did and what the outcome was for you. As always, talk to you next time and see you with love.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.